Welcome to yet another exciting video, in this case episode 9 of my Star Trek The Original Series episode breakdown video series. In this video, I'll be looking at Season 2, episodes 48 to 53 of Star Trek The Original or Generation to identify historical references which can be used to determine the original history of the Star Trek universe. The episode order I'm using is the production order. In order to understand the development of the history or vision of Star Trek, we need to study the episodes in the order they were written. While I'm uncertain of the exact writing order, the production order is about as close as I can confirm. The episode order information as broadcast is also included. Special thanks to transcripts which can be found on the Chakotay site. When Gene Roddenberry created Star Trek back in 1966, he had a vision which remained basically consistent over the following 3 years. The animated series and early movies retained this consistency in the most part. When The Next Generation was released in 1987, Gene's vision had changed and the past needed to change in order to be consistent with the new vision. This video series will look at the original vision of Star Trek, starting with the earliest source material. Any historical facts from later sources which contradict the earlier references will be assumed to be in error. Minor changes in nomenclature can be, of course, excused. The Immunity Syndrome is the 18th episode of the second season. It was the 48th episode produced. Its stardate is 4307.1 and its original air date was 19th of January 1968. Starbase 6 is mentioned in this episode, which, of course, as we've earlier discovered, is a planet. This is the first time Starbase 6 is mentioned, so I assume the Enterprise is in a new sector of the Federation, probably on the side furthest away from the Romulans. We finally discovered the Vulcan-manned starship. The USS Intrepid is a Federation starship manned, or Vulcaned, by Vulcans. Gamma 7a is an inhabited planet which has or was killed by the anti-life organism. It had a population of billions, and it's unclear if they were humans or aliens, but based on the population, alien is the most likely. They were most certainly part of the Federation. We discover in the episode the Vulcans can sense the death of many Vulcans, or fellow Vulcans, from interstellar distances, sort of like the Force in Star Wars. In this episode, we discover an alien single-cell zone of darkness, or death, has invaded the galaxy and destroys a starship and an entire inhabited system. It has probably destroyed a lot more on its way to the Federation. How did it get past the galactic barrier, I wonder? The key takeaways from this episode is that we now know there is a Starbase 6, which we know is a Federation Starfleet planet. Gamma 7a is an inhabited planet system which was killed by an anti-life organism, so it's no longer inhabited. It has a population, or had a population of billions, probably alien, and probably it was a member of the Federation. The USS Intrepid is a Federation starship crewed by Vulcans. By the looks of the image, it is a sister ship to the Enterprise. The Vulcans can sense the death of many fellow Vulcans from interstellar distance, sort of like something similar to the Force in Star Wars. Actually, this came before Star Wars, so this is earlier than that. A piece of the action is the 17th episode of the second season. It was the 49th episode produced. Its stardate is 4598.0 and its original air date was 12th of January 1968. In this episode, we discover a new planet. Sigma Iotia 2 is an alien planet at an early 19th century industrial state. Not a member of the Federation, but contacted before the Prime Directive was put into place. The Horizon was a starship which visited Sigma Iotia 2 and left a book about organised crime behind, which impacted the civilization. This was 100 years ago, so I expect the technological development was about the 1830s level when the Horizon arrived there. It's interesting the Federation did not have a subspace communication 100 years ago. We know the Prime Directive was not in effect at least 100 years ago, which is 2165. The Prime Directive was certainly not in effect before 2161, and I suspect it came into effect after the formation of the Federation sometime. The year is unknown, but may be close to 2165 or even as late as 2259, which is my personal theory. Key takeaways from this episode are Sigma Iotia 2 is an alien planet in an early 19th century industrial state, about the 1920s level. The Horizon was a starship which visited Sigma Iotia 2 in 2155, which may have occurred during the Earth-Romulan War. This is another proof point FTL drive was in existence in 2155. Otherwise, how would the Horizon be able to visit? Another point is that we know the closest Federation planet is 100 light years away, as the distress beacon used radio waves. So this was 100 light years beyond the Federation border in 2265 and much further away in 2155. The only way it could have got there was with FTL flight or capacity. By any other name is the 22nd episode of the second season. It was the 50th episode produced. Its star date is 4657.5 and its original air date was 23rd of February 1968. In the episode, we're introduced to yet another unknown planet, simply called Planet. I will call it Kelvin, as the human-formed Kelvins settle there at the end of the episode, but that is not the real name of the planet. We discover the Andromeda Galaxy is or was dominated by the Kelvin Empire, which had sent an expedition to the Milky Way. The alien race is very unlike humans, so probably has nothing to do with the civilization destroyed 500,000 years ago by some type of supernova, which we've covered earlier. Perhaps the supernova, which blew up in 500,000 years ago, had something to do with the rising radiation, which was affecting the Kelvin Empire now. I doubt it, but who knows? We encounter the barrier in this episode, which in this case damaged the Kelvin ship. No one is mentally enhanced, so perhaps this is a different type of barrier, or perhaps the mental enhancement only occurs in very unusual circumstances. We discover in this episode the Kelvins are really unusual creatures that do not resemble humans in any way, shape or form. Key takeaways are we're introduced to yet another unknown planet, which I'm calling, which was called Planet. I'm calling it Kelvin because the human-formed Kelvins eventually settled there. The Andromeda Galaxy was or is dominated by the Kelvin Empire, which had sent an expedition to the Milky Way a long time ago. Return to Tomorrow is the 20th episode of the second season. It was the 51st episode produced. Its star date is 4768.3 and its original air date was 9th of February 1968. The Enterprise comes across a very ancient planet, which I'm going to be calling Sargon. The show seems to be avoiding naming anything lately. I'm not quite sure why. I suppose I can't blame them. Anyway, this planet held a mighty advanced civilization which died out 500,000 years ago. Only the mental energies of some of its inhabitants are left. For some reason in this episode it takes 3 weeks to communicate with Starfleet. Perhaps this is well beyond Federation space. Within Federation space there may also be FTL relays, which makes communication much quicker. The ancient race which was on this planet, which I call Sargon, built a vault 500,000 years ago when the planet was destroyed. Sargon, one of the inhabitants, is their leader. We discover in the episode the inhabitants of the planet I call Sargon were exploring the galaxy 600,000 years ago and seeded many planets. Not sure what this exactly means, possibly influenced the local inhabitants rather than left their settlers, but you don't know, or I'm uncertain. Overview of the episode is that we come across a very ancient planet which I call Sargon. The inhabitants of this planet called Sargon explored and seeded the galaxy 600,000 years ago, basically 600,000 BC. In 500,000 BC they destroyed their own planet and went into some type of suspended animation, or at least their mental aspects or energies did. Patterns of Force is the 21st episode of the second season. It was the 52nd episode produced. Its star date is 2534.0 and its original air date was 16th of February 1968. In this episode we discover a new planet, Xeon. Xeon is a highly developed, peaceful planet. It's not part of the Federation and possesses space travel, at least interplanetary space travel. There is a second planet, or inhabited planet, in the system called Ecos. The Ecosians are primitive, warlike people in a state of anarchy. The Xeons came to assist them develop, which may have been an error for the poor old Xeons. John Gill from the Federation arrives possibly in 2263, possibly earlier, and because of him the Nazi movement starts on Ecos. Xeon had sent people to assist Ecos, but now find themselves persecuted. Their technology has been used, that is, the Ecos technology, has been used to create a space fleet. Key takeaways are Xeon is a highly developed, peaceful planet, not part of the Federation, and possessing space travel interplanetary. There is a second planet in the same system called Ecos. The Ecosians are primitive, warlike people in a state of anarchy. The people of Xeon partially colonised Ecos. John Gill arrives, possibly in 2263, maybe earlier, and because of him the Nazi movement starts on Ecos. The Ultimate Computer is the 24th episode of the second season. It was the 53rd episode produced. Its star date is 4720.4 and its original air date was 8th of March 1968. In the episode we are introduced to an AI called the M5 Multitronic Unit. We also discover a new planet in this episode, an uninhabited planet called Alpha Carina II. In the episode we see two other Federation starships similar to the Enterprise, which I assume they are called the Excalibur and Lexington. We also discover another spacecraft in this episode, an unmanned ore freighter called the Voden. In the episode we discover yet two more starships similar to the Enterprise, that is a total of 4 starships. In this case they are called the Hood and Potemkin. In conclusion, concerning this episode, we're introduced to a new planet, an uninhabited planet called Alpha Carina II. The Federation also has 4 other starships, I assume similar to the Enterprise or same class. These are the Excalibur, Lexington, Hood and Potemkin. Many of the latter Star Trek movies and shows do not align with the original vision of the series. This is common in real history, as later historians attempt to change the past to justify their beliefs or their new beliefs in the present. As I personally enjoyed the original vision of Star Trek, I would hope future movies and TV programs would come back to its original roots, but I doubt that'll ever happen. This concludes episode 9 of my Star Trek, the original series episode breakdown video series, in this case covering season 2, episodes 48 to 53. Alle guten Dingen, kommen zu einem Ende.